Hi, this is Heather Langford. This is my take on James Lowen's Teaching What Really Happened. I would have to say that I really enjoyed the book as a whole. However, there were a couple surprising elements, primarily how horribly inaccurate people have been taught history. It's still shocking to me, even when I hear about it now. Not surprising was my takeaway of textbooks are lacking in information and accuracy. Anyone that's been in a classroom recently, um, even as short as I have been, uh, could easily tell you that that is definitely the case. And I think that Lowings, when he starts focusing and going through the different chapters, the one that really stood out to me was the number four, was the idea of doing history, is that being the most important takeaway out of the entire book, in my opinion. Um, Now, I am new to a classroom, so I'm sure a lot of my thoughts and opinions are formed because of that on this. But I really thought the idea of, with doing history, that it's meant to supplement the information that we have. We have limited information, we have lacking information in our textbooks, and by allowing the students to help and research themselves, you really help to create critical thinkers along the line. As far as their entire education, not just social studies, not just secondary education, but collegiate, so on and so forth, and in general, them being better informed members of our society as a whole. Um, Going back to the textbook, Lowen's suggestion for students to supplement info by researching and writing their own sections or chapters, that assignment is, I think, fantastic. I think that's a great idea. It's something he referenced in chapter 4. And that even goes back further to chapter 1, where he spoke about the students doing research about their forefathers owning slaves, and students realizing that they weren't given the full picture in the original textbook. I think it really helps create a desire in students to learn what actually happened, to help correct uh, the information they've been provided. And really, Lowen goes on to talk about the look for internal contradictions. Um, Really, in helping them, when you talk about giving students primary secondary sources, when you tell them to, when you help focus them as far as research on a topic, you're helping developing their thoughts, you're organizing the data, logic, interpreting sources, position stating, and I think really the next step, and something that Lowen talked about, actually writing a paper, being an effective communication, doing that research. And I think that's really important to me. I think it's one of the most important points Lowen makes in the entire book, because it transcends just social studies, history, to general logic and reasoning of that student, which is immensely important in my opinion. Um, Another point that Lowen makes has to do with local history and the quote of all history is local. I think there are a lot of resources that can be pulled to help reinforce that understanding. Um, History influences uh, things on all levels. And for example, in this course, we're talking about using technology, art, music to actually do and better understand history. I think that's fantastic. They're talking about technology and just resources. One thing that I thought of while I was reading through Lowen's uh, book had to do with Google Expeditions. I don't know if anyone's maybe familiar with that, but it is fairly new service offered by Google. It has to do with the virtual reality field trips, and they have hundreds of expeditions all over the world. Pretty, in a lot of cases, they're all, for the most part, educational, um, and they have, where I've used it before when I was student teaching, had to do with the Battle of Gettysburg. We actually were able to go. Each kid had a virtual reality mask. I was able to point out different things to them, points of interest that the people there with the Gettysburg Museum had set up that was interesting. Another nice element of expeditions is you're able to put in your own points if you want to point out certain things to the kids, and you're able to see what they're seeing in real time. So you're making sure they're being involved in that lesson, visually hearing, experiencing, doing history. Um, Another great tool with expeditions is used in the form that the students themselves can be to use that in order to go to maybe a historical location in their own town. They're able to point out different things so that it'd be able to be seen by their classmates, by their teacher, um, and each group could take a point of reference of a certain element of that site and do a write-up on it and do a point of interest for expeditions. Um, but but with the doing history, uh, with the idea of primary and secondary source analysis, I really think it's important from a teaching standpoint for teachers to embrace that kind of reinforcement of information and the student's own discovery of that information. I've seen teachers that have embraced it, tried to incorporate it from day one, uh, and really, I've had the experience of working with one teacher that really just hated it. It was not something that she'd spent, much time on whatsoever. She felt like the kids weren't really capable of it, and that really reflected. I think if you give them the information, they really do rise to the occasion. Now, with Lowen, he goes on to bring up a couple different things that I think is really important as far as the idea of doing education that really helping developing that mindset in the students. For example, we have presentism, he, which is really applying modern principles and morals, to history. We're seeing this a lot in the cases of current events. For example, the statue of Stonewall Jackson being removed recently, renaming of dorms based on contributors historically, and people applying common principles and morals as they were thought of today. Now, there's still historical contributions have been made, but with presentism, they're downplayed because of, for example, when you look at our forefathers and owning slaves, things of that nature, that did take place, but there's still a historical element. You can still pull away from that. You don't have to discount that person altogether because they didn't follow the morality that you think they should have currently. It's just one element that students could think about. The teaching against the myth. That's something Lowen brought up in Chapter 9. They require evidence to back up a statement. That is key with critical thinking. It's for forming those arguments and just better communicating across the board. The one quote I had, the challenge to use actual evidence to mount arguments favoring one interpretation over another, students will gravitate towards the right answer. The idea of, as educators, laying out those breadcrumbs and for the students, and the students gaining and making it to the end themselves. That's really important for them to actually come to that conclusion themselves. For example, back in Chapter 1, where he talked about the students that did the research themselves, finding out about the forefathers and slavery, and them realizing the information. That's more powerful than them regurgitating the information we provided for them. They're going to remember something that they researched and came to the conclusion themselves. Also, the idea of compartmentalizing. He talks about that in Chapter 5. And the takeaway from that for me was you don't have to agree to understand the significance or importance of something said or done historically. He brings it up in the religious sense. I think it's important to take away from a primary source sense. You get a lot of that. Again, just because someone did something that you might not agree with, they still have a historical context and reasoning and information that can be useful to helping accomplish the goal. And that overall goal has to do with understanding, interpreting, and having an accurate idea of what happened historically. And I think that Lowen did a great job at explaining that, and I certainly appreciated it and hope to use some of these different elements in my classroom someday.